Hi, I'm Todd Curtis. I'm a video game and arcade game collector. This is my newest acquisition. It's an Atari 5200 Store Kiosk from approximately 1982. If you don't remember, the Atari 5200 was the successor to the Atari 2600, one of the very first video game consoles that I owned. I never actually owned a 5200 until now, and I'm kind of learning my way around, but it's actually a pretty fun system. So I'm going to show you the journey that we took to get here. It's another travel day for the old truck. We're going to see if this thing can get an Atari 5200 kiosk into the back. Driving all the way to Northville, Michigan today. Alright, so here we go. We've got this thing. We've got the truck out here. We're going to try to load this thing in and see what happens. We got it. Alright, it's 8:19 at night, and we're just now reaching Ann Arbor. So, estimated time of arrival at home is 1:30 in the morning. So it's a tradition that it always storms at some point on the way home. Everything was perfectly clear and fine. This giant cloud came out of nowhere.
It's kind of nice over here.
Alright, it's going to be a little glare here. I've got it in my garage, but basically this is an arcade monitor on the top. It's an Electrochrome G07, a very common arcade monitor from the early 80s. In the middle we have the plastic shell of a console. There's really not a real cartridge slot in it. It's just a cutout, so that doesn't stick into anything. We've got our joysticks with the phone type number pads, a couple start buttons. We've got the joystick fire buttons on the side. The speakers are up inside of there. Down here, can't see it right now because I have it taken out, but there's a roll that you can spin around with a knob to show the settings on the different games. And then down below, this one came without a panel in the front, which is apparently quite common. We have our main components, and inside of here we have a 5200 4-port board. I have taken the metal shielding and casing off to be able to access the chips underneath for testing. It's a little bit of a special board. It's got a special breakout for the audio that goes to this audio board in here. It has its own power too that comes from a power supply down below that is directly wired to the board. Some of these had the power come from the RF cable. This has its coming directly from a power supply. So some modifications to that board. And then we have the two joystick inputs, a volume knob, the sound amplifier board, and then down below we have a pretty heavy-duty power supply. It powers the monitor, the lights, and the Atari itself. And I've pulled some of the cords out to the front. These are actually cords that go to the monitor, and as does this one over here. But right now I have them out because I am working on the monitor. And this is the side art that you can see on the other side of the kiosk. And here's what the roll looks like taken out, sitting on a table inside for safekeeping. It just spins around, has information about all the various games on it. So here's a view with the front panel off. This panel of fluorescent bulbs has nothing really behind it. And then we've got our area for the monitor. And then we have yet another LCD bulb area that can move out of the way to get to just a few wires behind it. Our fluorescent panel. I've ordered LED bulbs to replace all these with. And then down below, this little panel here is what gives you access to both the roll that goes inside and to the joysticks and button mechanisms. And then with the light a little better view of what's inside the two sections. So here's what one of the bulbs look like. They're all pretty heavy duty 18-inch bulbs. Like I said, I've got replacements coming. I've got the monitor chassis out. I had a blown fuse by this big filter over here, so we're going to replace it. And we have, we'll replace the flyback and some other parts on it, see if we can't get this thing running. Alright, so I've got the monitor board out on the workbench. Got my supplies, soldering stuff, rebuild kit. Let's see if we can get this thing back to life. This is the fuse that it blew. It's the smaller of the two fuses. If you see that gigantic capacitor right next to it, that has to be discharged if that one's blown, and I discharged it and it had a huge amount of electricity in it. Also, if you ever work on a monitor, you have to discharge the anode there, and so I suggest if you don't know what you're doing, don't mess with monitors. Alright, it's all done, ready for testing. There's the carnage. Alright, so pop the monitor out, got the new boards in, everything hooked up. Got it powered up. I've got it laying on the floor so I can adjust it a little bit. It does actually take a composite video input, so I hooked up an old DVD player and Wreck-It Ralph, and as you can see, the monitor's doing fine. May need a little adjustment with the colors, things like that, but otherwise it's up and running again. So now we just have to get this board going and we'll be good. Okay, so now I've got the board out of the 5200 to do some board repairs. Right over here, very hard to see, I'm sure. Yep, doesn't want to zoom in and focus, but there is a capacitor there. It looks like a resistor that had a broken lead on it, so I don't know if that's something that blew or what, but that was under the hood. And I've got this donor 5200 non-working that I bought on eBay. I'll be taking it apart and using it to swap over chips and other things to try to isolate the problem. Hopefully it doesn't have the exact same problem that this board had. That would stink. Alright, so I've hit a little bit of a milestone here. I ended up needing to replace one of the transistors right under here. The one that you can see closest to me. And didn't get anything, started swapping some chips out of the donor board over here one at a time, and noticed a little action on the monitor here. It was all wavy, so I've moved it over to the TV, and as you can see, there's pole position. I've got only a black and white signal here, but I did have a color wavy signal here. So now the next step is try to figure out what's wrong with the monitor. Alright, so now I've got a reasonable picture. If we start it up, got lots of sound. Controls are working fine. So now I got to re-isolate everything, put it all back in the cabinet, try to get rid of as much interference as I can. Alright, we creep ever closer to the completion of this project. Got LED replacement lights in now for the fluorescent bulbs, all direct drive running. Got the game working. Now start putting things back together. We're still out here in the garage, so it's kind of bright, but running a little test game of Ms. Pac-Man. Alright, so we've got this thing out of the garage now with the help of my son and one of his friends. We hauled it into the basement. It's in the arcade with the other games and the rest of the collection. And this thing weighs a ton. They were built to last, there's no doubt about that. And at this point, looking at it, I could not figure out why the monitor continued to have so much interference with it. And I bought some ferrite beads and put them on the cables, did whatever I could, and I couldn't make it any better. And then it occurred to me that the capacitor that was cut or broken on the motherboard may have been intentionally cut. So at lunch one day I came home and I cut it, and immediately all the wavy lines on the monitor went away and I was left with a clear picture. And having looked up now composite and super video mods to the 5200 board, it looks like that's something that would normally have taken place. So don't always fix what you see is broken. We've got the roller back in place with the explanation of many of the early games in the system, how to play them. Kind of neat. Alright, so there's a 4013 flip-flop that controls the power to this. And normally when you turn the power on at the source by plugging it in or turning the power strip on, the unit starts up with the board off, but there's no power switch on the cabinet, so basically we would like for this to start up on whenever it gets power from the outside. So what I've done is I have soldered on a couple of small jumpers, and I'm reversing the output of this flip-flop so that when it first gets power it's on, and then if you hit the power button it would turn off. Now the 5200 up here is just a dummy unit, as we've mentioned before, and because the actual unit lies behind the door that I made down here, and we don't want to have to take the door off every time we want to change a game, I've bought an Atari Max Ultimate SD cartridge. Looks like that. This is also a dummy cart, but the real cart is down below, and it allows me to take all the games that I have, put them into memory up there, and we can just choose them from the menu, which makes things a lot handier. Well, I hope you enjoyed the journey that this kiosk has made. It's traveled hundreds of miles. It's been stripped apart, ripped apart, put back together, soldered, changed. At this point there's a little more monitor convergence work I need to do to get the picture just right, but it's perfectly functional the way it is. I like the spot that I've got it in here in the basement and joining all the other kiosks and arcade machines. And hopefully the next adventure is coming soon. Still a lot of fun.